Have you ever noticed? The louder you explain yourself, the weaker you look. The more you react, the more control you hand over. And the harder you try to prove your worth, the more obvious it becomes that someone has already pierced your calm. Let's face it, today's world is drowning in noise. And in this chaos, silence is no longer weakness. Silence is strategy. Think about it when your words are twisted, when honesty is weaponized, when every reaction of yours becomes a show for their amusement. This isn't a conversation anymore, it's a psychological battlefield. And here's the cruel trick: every time you raise your voice, you've already surrendered ground. But here's the twist you didn't see coming: you don't need to fight. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to explain yourself just to prove you're right. You only need two weapons: silence and time. Because the moment you go quiet, karma goes to work. You may be silent, but the universe is not. Truth has gravity, it always pulls back to where it belongs. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover in this video: 7 powerful situations where a wise person chooses silence not out of fear but out of strength, to protect energy, to preserve dignity, to let the weight of another's actions collapse on them without lifting a single finger. Because silence is not the absence of words, silence is the presence of control. So stay with me until the very last example, because the final one will forever transform the way you see silence. Let's begin with one of the most painful realities being lied about. Few things sting more deeply: the natural impulse to defend yourself, to set the record straight, to shout, "That's not me." But here's the harsh truth no one wants to admit: the more you defend, the guiltier you appear. The more you chase clarity, the more confusion they create. Why? Because liars aren't seeking truth, they're hunting your reaction. They want to shake your calm, they want to see you flinch, they want to watch you perform your innocence so they can twist it into evidence of guilt. And the moment you play their game, you've already lost. This is where Stoicism draws its line. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." And that's it. No pleading, no explanations. You live by your integrity, not by their distorted story. Because here's the secret: lies spread fast, but they never last. Truth takes longer, but it never needs defending. It reveals itself always in time. Let me paint you a picture. There was a man, let's call him James. At work, he was accused of something he didn't do. Whispers spread like wildfire. Colleagues pulled away. His first instinct to protest, to prove his innocence. But instead, James chose silence. He stayed steady. He did his job. He let his actions, not his words, speak for him. Weeks later, the truth surfaced. His accuser exposed for manipulation, and James untouched. Because he never fought back, he never lost face. He rose above the noise, and his dignity remained intact. That is Stoic power in its purest form. So how should you respond when someone lies about you? 3 steps: trust the long game. Lies burn bright but burn out fast. Truth lasts. Anchor yourself in values. When you know who you are, no rumor can touch you. Let karma speak. Liars trap themselves in their own drama, and sooner or later they collapse under their own weight. At the end of the day, silence is not surrender, it's self-respect. You are not hiding, you are rising. Rising above the gossip, above the pettiness, above the lies. Let them talk, let them twist, and let truth do what it always does: return home. And if lies cut deep, betrayal cuts deeper. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it shifts the ground beneath your feet. It comes from those you trust: friends, partners, family. And when it lands, it feels like your chest caves in. Your first instinct to confront, to demand answers, to shout, "How could you?" But here's the brutal reality. People who betray you have already chosen their side long before you ever ask the question. In the last chapter, we uncovered how lies lose their power when met with silence. But betrayal cuts even deeper. Because here's the thing: people who betray you have already justified it in their minds. Sometimes they convince themselves they did nothing wrong. Other times, worse still, they know exactly what they've done, and they simply don't care. And the harder you push for closure, the more you end up reopening your own wound. You see, when someone betrays you, what they truly want isn't just to hurt you, it's to drain you. They crave your energy, your outrage, your confusion, your heartbreak. Why? Because your reaction proves they mattered. Your pain becomes their proof of importance. So what happens if you refuse to give them that satisfaction? What happens when you respond with no rage, no revenge, no desperate explanations, only silence? That's when the tables turn. They don't just lose access to your words, they lose access to your very soul. And that loss is far greater than any confrontation you could ever give them. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Betrayal is that friction. It stings, it grinds, but it also clarifies. It separates the genuine from the convenient, the loyal from the opportunistic. It forces you to face one brutal reality: not everyone you love is meant to stay in your life." Let me share a story. There was a woman, we'll call her Sarah. She had a best friend for more than a decade. They shared everything: dreams, doubts, victories, secrets whispered late at night. But one day, Sarah discovered the unimaginable. That very friend had betrayed her, exposing her secrets, undermining her success. And for what? Jealousy, insecurity, ego. Sarah's first impulse was fire. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted to unleash every ounce of pain to make her friend feel the damage she had caused. But instead, Sarah chose silence. No fight, no shouting, no dramatic scene, just a quiet, graceful exit. And what happened? The friend waited for the explosion. She braced herself for the chaos. But all she was met with was absence. And that absence was deafening. Because silence carries weight. Silence echoes louder, lasts longer, and cuts deeper than any argument ever could. So when betrayal comes, and it will sooner or later remember three things: accept reality. See them for who they truly are, not for who you hoped they were. That version you loved no longer exists. Don't waste breath. Never spend words on someone who already reduced your worth to scribbles in pencil. You don't need to explain what they chose to ignore. Walk away without explanation. Silence forces reflection, and reflection is the one thing betrayers fear the most. At the end of the day, you are not the one who lost. They are. They lost access to someone loyal, authentic, and rare. Let them live with that truth, not through your punishment, but through your absence and your peace. And now let's move to the next trial: insults. Because betrayal wounds the heart, but insults aim straight at your pride. Insults are cheap, that's why the weak rely on them. Whether it's sarcasm, passive-aggressive remarks, or direct verbal jabs, insults aren't about truth. They're about provocation. They are hooks thrown into the water, hoping you'll bite. And the very moment you snap back, raise your voice, or defend yourself, you've taken the bait. You've handed over control. It doesn't matter how sharp or clever your comeback is. If you respond, you've already played their game. Most people don't realize this. You don't have to win the argument. You only need to refuse to enter it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Read that again. When someone insults you, they're extending an invitation, a challenge to drag you down into the mud with them. They hope you'll abandon your dignity and join their mess. But a Stoic does not live in the mud. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't lash back. He simply observes, calm, steady, unbothered. Here's a story. A man, we'll call him David, had just earned a well-deserved promotion. At a company event in front of a crowded room, a jealous coworker tried to humiliate him. "Wow," the coworker sneered. "I guess they're giving promotions to just anyone these days." All eyes turned to David, waiting for the reaction. Would he defend himself? Fire back with a clever jab, but David did none of that. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He looked his coworker straight in the eye, smiled, and said nothing. No comeback, no drama, just silence. And in that moment, David didn't just win the room, he won the war. Because silence strips power away. And nothing frustrates an insulter more than being completely ignored. So how do you handle insults? First, recognize what they're really fishing for. They don't want truth, they want a reaction. And if you deny them that reaction, you've already won. In the previous part, we saw how insults lose their sting when met with indifference. But there's another layer of silence that's even more powerful when you refuse to let manipulative people disrupt your peace. Because here's the truth, some people don't want resolution, they want reaction. They don't want calm, they want chaos. And the moment you flinch, you give them exactly what they came for. That's why your stillness matters. When your face doesn't twitch, when your voice stays steady, your silence speaks louder than 100 words. It sends one clear message. You don't control me, so remember 3 things. Don't let them disrupt your peace. Protect your calm like it's treasure. Let your stillness speak. Silence paired with composure sends a message that cuts deeper than anger ever could. Hold your frame. True confidence doesn't argue. Real self-respect doesn't beg to be understood. And when you refuse to lower yourself, they're left with nothing to rise on. At the end of the day, you don't need to compete with their noise. You only need to master your silence. Because real strength doesn't yell, it doesn't need to. And the most devastating response to an insult will always be indifference. But here's the trap. Some people aren't just insulters, they're actors. They don't want solutions, they want attention. They don't want to solve problems, they want to control the story. And the most effective role they can play, the victim. They twist reality, rewrite the script, erase their part in the drama, and suddenly you're the villain. They shed tears, bend facts, play fragile, and now the audience sees you as the aggressor. The more you explain, the worse it looks. Because to outsiders, it's not you defending yourself, it's you attacking someone who's already hurting. The roles have flipped and you've been cast as the enemy in their little stage play. This isn't conflict, this is theater, a performance designed to win sympathy. And Stoic wisdom warns us of this exact trap. Epictetus once said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." Victim players don't complain for resolution, they complain for attention. They're not seeking justice, they're seeking an audience. And the moment you defend yourself, you've joined their act. The only winning move is silence. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Rachel. She had a coworker who constantly twisted reality. Every time she was held accountable, she cried, deflected, shifted blame. Rachel tried to stay calm, she brought proof, she explained the facts, but every time it backfired. Why? Because while Rachel spoke logic, the other woman played emotions. And in the court of public opinion, emotion almost always wins when reason argues too long. So Rachel stopped. She stopped defending, stopped explaining, stopped trying to prove herself right. She simply stood still, grounded in silence. And over time, the truth began to surface. People noticed the pattern. They saw how this coworker always had a sob story, always a new villain, always a fresh injustice. And slowly, the act collapsed under its own weight. So how do you deal with a manipulative victim? 3 rules. Don't defend yourself. They're not listening, they're performing. And the crowd loves drama. Don't feed it. Stay detached. Observe, don't absorb. Let them drown in the chaos they've created. Trust patterns. People might believe them once, maybe twice, but lies can't mask themselves forever. Repetition always reveals the truth. At the end of the day, you don't owe clarity to someone who profits from confusion. Let them play their role, let them gather their audience, let them run their script. Because every show eventually ends. And silence, that's how you close the curtain. But silence cuts both ways. Because sometimes the most painful insult isn't shouted, it isn't even spoken. It's when the person you gave your time, your love, your presence stops noticing you altogether. You showed up, you cared, you called, you reached out, and in return you're met with nothing but indifference. No betrayal, no explosion, just the slow erosion of your worth in their eyes. And that silence can hurt more than any words ever could. In the last part, we talked about how silence becomes the sharpest answer when someone stops valuing your presence. Because sometimes it's not words that reveal the truth, it's absence. Here's the bitter truth, the more you try to prove your worth, the less they recognize it. Why? Because people rarely value what's always available. They value what they're afraid to lose. And when you're constantly present, constantly reaching out, constantly giving, you don't become irreplaceable. You become background noise, familiar, faded, invisible. This is where Stoicism quietly hands you your power back. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth," and sometimes the very truth people need to discover is the weight of your absence. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, we'll call him Jake. He was the dependable one, the friend who always checked in, the colleague who remembered birthdays, the partner who never forgot to ask, "How was your day?" Jake gave consistently without fail, but slowly he began to notice something unsettling. No one asked about his day, no one reached out unless he reached out first, and when he stopped calling, days quietly slipped into weeks of silence. That's when Jake realized he wasn't being valued. He was just being used, convenient, not cherished. So Jake made a decision. No fights, no speeches, no accusations. He simply stopped. Stopped chasing, stopped reminding, stopped carrying the weight of one-sided relationships. And what happened next was the answer he had been searching for all along. The ones who truly cared, they reached out, they noticed the silence, they made the effort, and the ones who didn't, they faded away, disappearing without a sound. So what do you do when your worth is ignored? 3 steps: stop chasing. If they can't see your value while you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Say nothing. Silence forces awareness. Your absence becomes a mirror they can't avoid. Observe who shows up. The ones who truly matter will move toward you without needing reminders. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with endless effort. You prove it with distance. Those who deserve your energy will feel the silence deeply, and those who don't, they were never meant to have it. Let your absence speak for you. Let it echo in the space they once took for granted. And never ever beg to be seen by those who have already chosen to close their eyes. But silence isn't just for neglect. Some people don't want peace at all. They want provocation. They poke. They prod. They say things designed to sting, not because they're courageous, but because it's the only way they feel powerful. The moment you flinch, they win. The moment you argue, they feed. The moment you let your emotions rise, they know they've got you hooked. Here's the truth most people miss. The goal isn't conflict. The goal is control. They want to shake your frame, to drag you into their chaos, to make you act out of their emotions. Because if they can trigger you, they become the puppeteer pulling strings from behind a carefully staged smile. But this is exactly where Stoicism becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is the essence of self-mastery. You can't stop others from provoking you, but you can deny them the very thing they crave most, your reaction. Let me share a story. There was a man, let's call him Adam. He had a coworker who thrived on chaos. Every meeting, every casual interaction, there was always a jab, a sarcastic remark, a passive-aggressive insult. Always sharp enough to sting, but vague enough to avoid accountability. At first, Adam defended himself. He explained, argued, justified, and every single time he left the room more exhausted than before. Until one day, Adam made a shift. The next time that coworker tried to provoke him, Adam didn't argue. He didn't defend. He simply looked him in the eyes, gave a faint smile, and stayed silent. In the last chapter, we saw how Adam disarmed provocation with nothing but calm silence. Because sometimes the most powerful move is not reaction, but refusal. He gave only a calm nod, no sighs, no eye rolls, no tension, just stillness, pure detached silence. And the result? The coworker flinched. Because when someone is used to playing with fire, they don't know what to do when the match refuses to light. Without fuel, even the most toxic flame eventually dies out. So how do you deal with provocation? 3 simple truths. Recognize the pattern. Repetition always reveals motive. If someone constantly stirs conflict, understand it's not personal, it's strategic. Hold your frame. Don't let emotional bait pull you out of alignment. Control your breath, your tone, your posture. Stay unshakable. Let calm be your power. The stronger your stillness, the weaker they become. Because the truth is, not every provocation deserves your energy. Not every opponent deserves a response. At the end of the day, the strongest man in the room isn't the loudest one. He's the one everyone tries to provoke and no one can move, because his silence isn't empty, it's armor. And here's the irony: regret is loud, but silence is louder. There always comes a moment after they've taken you for granted, after they've ignored your value, after they assumed you'd always be there, when they finally realize you're gone. And suddenly the silence they once dismissed becomes deafening. They start remembering the way you listened, the way you showed up, the way you gave far more than you ever received. And then it hits them: they didn't just lose a person, they lost a presence, a constant, a light. But by then it's too late. Here's what you need to understand: if someone only starts to value you after you've left, they never truly valued you when it mattered most. And the worst mistake you could make is to return just because they finally noticed. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery means exactly this. You don't return to the places that broke you. You don't lower your standards to soothe someone else's guilt. You don't explain your silence. You let your silence explain itself. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Olivia. She gave everything to her relationship: her time, her love, her energy, and her partner. He got comfortable. He took her presence for granted, assuming she would always be there. Until one day she wasn't. She left quietly. No arguments, no tears, no dramatic exit, just a calm departure. At first he brushed it off. He thought she'd come back. But then came the weeks, the months, the unanswered calls, the growing emptiness of a presence he never appreciated until it was gone. And when regret finally hit, he begged, he apologized, he promised change. But Olivia, she had already healed, and her silence had become her freedom. So what do you do when someone regrets losing you? 3 rules. Don't give them an easy way back. If your value was invisible before, let your absence remain visible now. Resist the urge to explain. Don't cushion their guilt with closure. Let them sit with the weight of their own actions. Stand firm in silence, not out of spite, but out of respect for yourself. Because at the end of the day, they had access to you and they wasted it. Now let them carry that truth alone. Your silence is not punishment. Your silence is wisdom. It says, you don't get to walk in and out of my life and still expect the door to remain open. Let them regret. Let them remember. But don't let them return. You don't owe them a second chance. You owe yourself peace. And that's the final truth. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. And you don't need words to make a statement. In a world addicted to noise, silence itself becomes radical. It is not weakness. It is not surrender. Silence is the language of those who no longer need validation. Because when you fall silent, you reclaim your power. You step out of the trap. And you allow time, truth, and karma to finish the sentence you chose not to speak. A Stoic man does not chase approval. He does not beg for closure. He does not collapse under pressure. He simply steps back and trusts the universe to do what it always does: restore balance. So the next time someone lies to you, betrays you, insults you, provokes you, or regrets losing you, remember this: don't respond, don't explain, don't perform. Just watch, just wait. Because karma doesn't need your help. It only needs your silence. And if this message resonates with you, if you felt truth between these words, don't just click away. Subscribe to Stoicism Breath, where strength is quiet, wisdom is sharp, and every word is built to last. And if someone you know needs this message, share it, send it, or let your own silence echo it forward.